Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Single Player Storage. Today we're going to be taking a look at inputs and outputs. And behind me we have the wall of items. This is a part of the previous episode where I ran through the options of items I'm going to be sorting, and I also have had some information on stuff we wouldn't be sorting. Now, I actually had a little bit of a thought process and I couldn't actually remember whether or not I mentioned what we would do with the unsorted items. Kind of was something that I brushed over and I don't totally remember, so I thought I'd kind of go through some of that information for you right now. And also I had some questions that were sent to me from the last episode, so I thought maybe I would address those a little bit in this episode too, just to give us a quick rundown, and that way we can all end up on the same place before we continue on with the series. So first of all, with all the items that we're not going to be sorting in the system, the best thing for me to do is to go ahead and chuck them in a 6x loader. I'm going to have them loaded up into boxes. The boxes will be broken, stored in like a separate location, and at that point I can use the system where I can kind of scroll over the boxes and have a look inside them. I believe it's a Tweakaroo mod, or it's maybe Mini HUD, I forget which one it is. Whichever it is, you can use that. Obviously, if you're using a vanilla client, you can still hover over it and see the inputs of like diorite and stuff. Obviously, if that precedes it, then you can then you can take boxes out, have a look inside of them. Obviously, that's counterproductive for me. I'm going to be using Tweakaroo, so this system works out really well for me. So for that reason, it was kind of fine to just have everything in boxes and then figure it out from there. So for me, that kind of seems to work out much better. Instead of trying to store any extra items, it makes the storage system considerably smaller, more accessible, a little bit nicer. That's kind of my whole thought process behind all of this anyway. So now let me go ahead and maybe answer some questions that may have popped up in the last episode. I don't really remember how many of them there were that was actually even worth going through at the moment. So let's have a quick look at some of them. So one of the questions I get a lot of, and I'm still not quite sure what the issue with this is the question like this one here from Nick Frank. Why do you not use MIS for everything that you're not actually storing in the main storage system? Why not use multi-item? Here's a quick breakdown, and hopefully I can just use this the next time anyone asks me this question again. Multi-item storage is a little bit weird because it kind of relies on you having a multiple amount of small amounts of items, and that generally speaking is kind of okay and kind of fits within the parameters of what I was going to do with all the extra items anyway. But let's just say, for example, you have 25 stacks of stairs that you crafted for a project. You no longer use them, but let's say, for example, stairs are not something you keep on your normal system. You then go ahead and chuck that into your MIS, and once one double chest that's assigned to your MIS that also is supposedly supposed to take up items of 30 other different items of that sort. Let's just say, for example, you chuck all of those in there, and now for some reason you now have a double chest or two double chests worth of that one item that you don't store. MIS becomes a little bit useless in that scenario because you now just have everything kind of sitting, being filled by mostly stairs, for example. This is an exaggerated thought process, so just bear with me on this one. But let's just say, for example, you have that, and then you have 4 double chests worth of MIS. One slot is assigned to like 10 different items, but for the first 2 double chests you just have one type of item. Just seems a little bit unproductive for me. It seems a little bit unnecessary, and even though it's kind of a case scenario, it just doesn't feel like it's really worth my time. Now obviously you could do the whole situation where you assign slots to have a certain amount of one item, but then it requires more work and you have to kind of slot assign, and then you also, when you remove items, you have to make sure you leave one in there. It's a whole thing. I don't really care about it. That's my main reason for not using MIS. If I'm wrong in this and you think I'm missing a point of MIS here, maybe let me know in the comment section down below yourself. However, that's the main reason I'm not using it, and hopefully that should answer any questions, and hopefully now I can just link to this video again if anyone ever asks me this again. Krishna Mittal asks, can you build weapon and tool sorter? As far as I'm concerned, I don't think you can build a weapon and tool sorter. I think you can only build certain unstackable filters, which I think I've kind of already got an idea of what I'm going to use. I'm probably going to go for Command Leo's unstackable sorter. We'll probably figure out the mains of that at some point. With tools and weapons and stuff, again, I think that's probably best something that you chuck in a box and maybe manually sort yourself. Maybe I'll have a separate box loader or a separate like stacker chest that deals with unstackables that aren't going to be assigned to certain chests, so maybe that'll be useful for something. Some people had questions like, why aren't you sorting out cauldrons, or why are you not sorting out the lightning rod, for example, something like that. Those things are somewhat useful for things. Number one, lightning rods are generally kind of useless for me. If you want to prevent lightning, I mean, you need 1 or 2 of them at a time, and then generally they're not really that useful. Maybe I'll use a few of them for building, but then again, fits perfectly in the item storage of putting it in a box and parking it in some excess storage. And then the other one was something like a cauldron, which generally speaking, cauldrons are kind of useless to me because the composter exists. So composters are more desirable because they also help with lag optimization on hoppers. So they're generally the better item for me. There are case scenarios where you need cauldrons. I haven't come across any particularly myself just yet. But if I do ever come across them, I don't think I'll need more than a few at a time. This question's from Twiglet MC, and it's not really a question, it was more of a statement. And he said, I don't know, Shady, what about good old-fashioned chess monster? And to be honest with you, yes. That more or less covers the questions that we had from the last episode, and probably ones that were kind of backlogged from before. Maybe there'll be some more that I missed, so if you want to leave some in the comment section, let me know, I'll answer some more next time. But for now, that should cover most of the issues. To be honest with you, the main question was the MIS one. I think I've kind of gone through that enough as it is. So now let's move on from the controversy of items. Let's go talk about inputs and outputs, the main objective of today's episode. Now, we're going to go through a couple things. I may or may not include other stuff in this too. Maybe this will end up being a long one. I don't know. I say this all the time and it ends up being a long one. So let's get strapped in and see where we end up here. So maybe let's start off with inputs first of all. So in front of us here, we have a bunch of inputs that I've kind of whacked together more of like an exemplatory thing. Most of them are kind of functional, obviously still missing quite a few of the features here, but let's just go through some of the exemplatory inputs that I had in mind. A couple of these are relatively similar, but all with some sort of slight modification in just like the UI sense of things, just to have them looking a little bit different, trying to figure out what I liked. So let's start off with the section over here on the right. This first input system is going to be, well, actually, before we do this, let me preface by saying the options that I've decided to go for, maybe this will and won't change at some point. So first of all, with the input, I'm planning on doing more of a split. So we're going to do the whole shulker box and then chest on the left. Why are these trap chests? Why did I use trap? Okay, hold on. This isn't supposed to be like this. Is already a bit of a disaster, but let's just go ahead and ignore that for now. So these are trap chests. They're not supposed to be, or maybe they were supposed to be. I don't really remember anymore. Anyway, the point is that the system here we're going to be using is going to be based on the design idea that Cubic had in one of his videos. Maybe he wasn't the originator. Maybe he was, I don't totally remember, so let's just say he was for now. The idea here would be that you have a shulker box input for your items and then the chest for your shulker boxes itself. So for example, what you would do is you could hold shift and then put in your items into here. Obviously a shulker box doesn't go into a shulker box, so you could shift all your items into a shulker box and then any remaining boxes can go into the chest here. This is the system we're going to be using pretty much throughout the whole thing. We'll discuss the other bits in a minute too. So ultimately, they're all the same system. We're just looking at user layout. So for example, this one here was having the chest directly in front of you here with the shulker box on the side, which can be broken and replaced. The second layout here, same thing again. Boxes on the top, chest is on the bottom. The chest is like directly in front of you over here. The box is a little bit higher up. Obviously, we're thinking about like nice usability here. Box will be broken in the same way and replaced. There was a slight delay just based on the fact that sometimes items will get sucked up. The ones that are in here will get sucked up and put into the chest instead. What we're actually doing in this scenario is we're just feeding the shulker box directly into the chest. And that way when you break them, they just stay in the system. That makes way more sense than actually putting them into a separate stream. So obviously they'll be broken and buffered into the chest here. Same situation with this one. This one's a little bit lower down, more directly in front of you. With this one, that's kind of cool. It's kind of in the floor, a little bit more hidden. I kind of like this design initially. This was one of the first ones I liked. Same situation here with the box breaking. I think it's pretty cool, but I'm not really 100% sold on the exact design I want to use here. So this is actually one of the reasons why I'm showing you. This is the same one over here. There is that one, but the difference being with this one is this one's like kind of more accessible on the front here for you. There's a reason why I shouldn't have chosen trap chest for this one, and now I realize why. Same situation with the box breaking and whatnot. That one's a little bit slower. You'll see some of the mechanics in a second. It's kind of whatever. Design is a little bit different. Actually has the chest directly in front of you this time and the shulker box on the bottom. A little bit of a weird setup now that I'm actually looking at it again, but still feel like it looks very cool, but I might be wrong here. I don't know. I'm still trying to figure out whether I like it or not. Essentially, the idea on this one is the box at the bottom here is a 0 tick broken, and the box will be replaced. There you go. A little bit on the slower side. I haven't really tweaked the redstone for it to be an efficient setup for any of these really. It's mostly just to get an idea of what I preferred. And yeah, so you can, same concept, but we're zero ticking the composter in and replacing boxes that way instead. This last design's a little bit different and a little bit weirder. This is more of a concept of idea, but I don't know whether I do and don't like it, but we'll see how it goes anyway. So the idea with this one would be that you would have more of item sides here. So you would do the same situation, move forward, boxes broken, and that one's chucked in the water stream. Any extra boxes you have, you just throw in there. Ignore that yellow box. That was just a that was mini HUD. So again, if I demonstrate this process for you again, you chuck your boxes in, walk forward, and then obviously you can just decide to throw out the boxes here. I'm not going to use my hotkey for this one. Very cool idea, if I'm completely honest. I kind of like it. It's a bit different, a little bit less like you know, input chesty, a little bit less like standard. Kind of reminds me of the one that Cubvan used, where he chucked everything into like a big hole, Shibulba as I think he called it. Kind of reminds me of that a little bit, with some, you know, with a little bit more redstone technicality behind it, I guess. Pretty cool idea, but I don't know. I'm a bit sus on this one. I do like it. So far though, if I'm completely honest, I think my favourite one is probably still one of the simpler ones, which is probably either going to be this one here, or maybe even this one. Actually, I kind of like this one as well, to be honest with you. I like the hiding of the double chest at the bottom. I think it looks cool, but not sure. Either way, these are like the kind of like rough ideas of what I got here. Having a look at some of the redstone in the back here, relatively straightforward. A lot of slime used just to make the, you know, kind of like make the thing compact and less headachy when it comes to the redstone. I'm sure a lot of these can probably be compacted, so I'll probably put this in Discord for anyone else to have a peek at and mess around with themselves. With some of these taken into consideration, I guess the next part of this is going to be what we do with the box processing. But more importantly, I think the first thing to address is, should there be a failsafe included in any of these? Now, as a single player storage system, I'm not too sure whether it's worth doing or not, mainly because when we do get to the control panel of things, it'll make a little bit more sense. But I think there should be some safety feature put into place to unstupefy when people be stupid. Now, what I actually mean by that is actually adding in some sort of checker to make sure that the items that go through in the double chest aren't actually items and are indeed shulker boxes. I can totally imagine, even in my single player world, me accidentally putting items into the double chest instead of putting them in the shulker box. But I guess at that point the question just becomes, should you have a double chest that you just chuck items into and let them be sorted into a shulker box? To me the answer is no, and I actually had that initial thought process, and I think Boyan was the one who suggested that I go the route of having the separate shulker box and then having the double chest that you put the shulker boxes into. I'm in total agreement with it, and I'm thinking that should be fine. Now, what I think I'm going to do, I'm probably going to take one of the designs here and kind of roll with it and say that that's probably going to be the system that I end up using. And then what we'll probably try and do is see if we can work on some sort of system to actually detect what we're going to be taking in and whether or not it's going to be something useful. Now, the reason why I'm not too worried about it on single player is because I do want to have a system that I manually turn on the storage system once I want to run it, or whenever I do want to run it. So for me, it's not totally important to do that, because things should hopefully stay in that chest at least for a little while before I do it. But I still think it might be worth exploring the option. So let's try and see if we can do that first of all. So the first thing that we're going to need is maybe a system, something like this. Now this is a sorter by Command Leo, I believe. Actually splits up items from shulker boxes and actually splits up unstackables too. We'll just go ahead and grab a sword just for demonstration purposes. You can see I got 2 shulker boxes in my inventory along with some stackables and unstackables. And we're going to go ahead and chuck all of these into the system here. The system will nice and silently take care of all the system. You can see here we've got the yellow shulker boxes. And in the other chest, we've got everything that isn't a shulker box. So this is actually a really good way to take care of these items. Now, there is a little bit of an issue. Also, I've checked it with stackable shulker boxes. Also works. No specific reason why it shouldn't, but just as like a heads up. But one of the issues with this system is that, honestly speaking, it's going to slow things down quite a bit. Because if you go ahead and put a stack of an item in there, you're also going to have a shulker box, a bunch of stackables, and you're going to have to wait for that to eventually go through the system. It runs at hopper speed, so you're going to be a minute here before this all starts. The biggest issue with this is going to be, do you trigger this do you trigger your chunk loading system when you add items in an input? This is where things get a little bit tricky, because ultimately for me, what I want to do is keep everything, all the shulker boxes in a buffer, and then process items as I feel like doing them at some point. This is going to make it tricky because if you chuck everything into a double chest, you then leave the area and then put everything in there. This is just going to eventually end up being stuck in a system there. So probably not the best option for this. So instead what we should try and do is see if we can try and upgrade the system a little bit into making it so the naughty users of this system have to either made aware or somehow have to pay for what they've done. We're going to use this module as an example because this is probably going to be the one that I end up going with. Same one as you saw earlier, I've just moved things back a little bit, made it so the chest is a little bit more accessible, although if I'm totally honest with you guys, I probably want to put the slab back there again because it looked a little bit nicer. And I could probably do that as well. So yeah, I think that's probably a little bit nice. I can still access it, I don't need to be weird about it. Might change this to an iron trapdoor to cover up because, you know, you can end up grabbing this anyway. So let's use this as an example. So the first thing that I want to do is to make a system where, first of all, when we put in boxes into the double chest here, or we put in items in here and we break the box, the chest just holds on to all of the items here. Now, what we could potentially do in this scenario is put a trap chest here, but obviously once you close a trap chest, the items are going to go through the system anyway, so we want to keep them here. We want to give the idiot who's going to put in items into the system, usually maybe even me, and you know, one chance at redemption. We want to make sure that even though they placed it in here, they're going to say, you know what, oh no, my bad, I placed an item in there, let me remove that. So we're going to try and do that first, and then, you know, see if they can take it out there. They're going to have to, in order to let it go, is to press this button here. So the idea behind this system is basically something like this. It's kind of like a T flip-flop system. Pretty straightforward, can probably make it a little bit smaller, but whatever. We're just trying to get the idea of what we're doing here at least. I kind of made it a little bit more compact here, but it didn't really work out because of the dimensions of everything else that basically goes into it. So again, oops, excuse me, we have plenty of time, so we can break a box in here, for example. It's in here. I've given it enough delay so we make sure that the boxes always go in there, and even with only one box, it should still work perfectly fine. So it works with a good minimum requirement at least. And the good thing is, if the chest ever gets backed up and there's no more space for items to go, it just basically carries on trying to feed out. So you'll never really have an issue with it because it only resets the system once it's empty. So with the final shot of redemption, what do we do now? You know, we've given the idiot a chance to put in the items. We've given him a chance for redemption to pull it all out. We still have an issue where the items have gone through. So what we're going to do in this scenario is we're going to now filter out anything that happens. So boxes will go through, items will not. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and attach the filter over there into this system, and we're just going to go ahead and filter everything out from it. So I've gone ahead and added in the system over here, but now I want to change obviously things up a little bit here because we need things to work slightly differently in the scenario. So what we're going to do is, now that we've let the system go through, we've given them the chance of redemption, we now need to make them aware of their mistakes, what they've done. Now, the easier thing here to do, and the more sensible thing here to do, would be to get the items that come out and put them into shulker loaders, recycle that back into the system. But we're not going to do that here. We're not here to add more bulk on the system. This kind of gets rid of the point. We're instead going to teach the person who's made the error, we're going to teach him a little lesson. So here's the plan. Instead of we're going to have the system here which takes the shulker boxes in. So we're going to have individual systems here. So what we'll do, we're actually going to give the boxes an opportunity to end up in the water stream here. So we're going to do something like this, and just for simplicity here, what we'll do is we will add in some rails here. Okay, and then we want to do the same thing on this one, and we can just go ahead and extend that out there. So we've given ourselves a little bit of just an idea of how things are going to work out here. So let's go ahead and test the system out a little bit. We're going to chuck in all of these items here. We're going to go ahead and break that box. Let's break two actually, just to be safe. And then we're going to go ahead and do the system release. So now the system should work as intended. All the items are coming out on one side, and the shulker boxes both come out on the other. Brilliant. So nothing's left in the system, hopefully. Let's just double check that. Yep, everything seems good, nothing in any of those. So now we've gone ahead and split the items up. Obviously, this is going to be a standard water stream here. These boxes can now go off to further processing or into the void, I guess. Now, what do we do with these items here? We are going to give the items back to the player. We're actually going to give him a third shot at redemption, and hopefully this one should be the last one that they need. I mean, if you're making mistakes even after this, I mean, God help all of us, basically. So here's what we're going to do. I don't know if any of you guys have ever seen Game of Thrones before, but we're going to give him a little shame bell. Shame! Okay, I've had way too much fun with the system, so it's actually time to test out the system now. So let's do a little POV. POV. So you come here, you've been instructed, hey, don't use the system the way we told you not to use it. Make sure you put all your items in the shulker and put it in the chest. But you said, you know what? I don't really care what people say. I don't really listen to instructions around here. I'm going to go ahead and be the person that no one likes on the server. You've again ignored instructions, even though you've seen it in here. You have to now press the verification button. You press said verification button. You're like, you know what? See you later. And then, oh no, the shame bell's rang. The shame bell's ringing because you've done wrong, and all your items come back out to you, spat back out, and now you have to sit here in shame, like the non-listener you are, and you have to now put these items back in a shulker box to be sorted properly. In all seriousness, though, this is kind of like a semi-good system here. You probably get rid of the shame bell or whatever, although it's kind of fun to have as well. But yeah, you can kind of see the concept here. You put everything through. Luckily, just before you leave, you hear the bell of shame, and you have an opportunity. So yeah, this is the bulk of the redstone. Pretty straightforward, actually. And to be fair, if you don't want to add the drop of shame, you can just leave it all off, leave it there for now. But this should hopefully actually suffice as a pretty good system otherwise, to be honest with you. So even though that was pretty straightforward, I think it's still fun to watch. So I'm just going to do a quick little view of us actually watching it this time so we can see the system working in itself. Boxes are going to get spit out on the left. You can see items are being spat back out to go into the water stream. Anytime there's normal items that go through, we ring the bell to let him know the shame is happening. There is actually a little bit of a flaw with the system here, if I'm completely honest, which is that if you do put the system through and like there's like a bunch of boxes that go before the items, the bell probably won't ring in time by the time you've flown away. So yeah, there is obviously a slight issue with it, but still, hey, it's a little bit of fun. And gives you an opportunity to make up for everything that you've done. And also, imagine you put so many stacks in there. Actually, this is another point that I didn't actually mention. So, this actually works pretty well if you've got like bunches of stacks of stuff. Because let's say, for example, you did something like this, right? And so you got a couple of boxes in there, and then you put all of this stuff in there anyway. Let's hit the... Oops, sorry, that wasn't right. Let's put this in there. Items are going to start trickling through, and then you're going to hear the bell, but you can see you're still emptying items out over here. So you actually even still have a third chance of redemption. You can now say, oh, I made a mistake, crap, let me take all this out. And you can still save yourself a little bit of headache at least, and you won't be in such shame that you won't be able to face the rest of your server friends. Actually, you know what? I'm not going to lie, I'm kind of impressed with this system. I think I have a reason to be. Shout out to Boyan for mentioning dropping the items back to you. I was actually going to put them in a chest and then highlight this, but it actually seems so much more degrading that you have to deal with them being chucked back at you again. And you know what? To even add one more layer of obviousness, you can also put a warning light here as well. So if the bells didn't get you, hopefully the warning sign should as well. And at that point, now, if you're not shamed at this point, then I don't even know what to tell you. But all jokes aside, that panel actually led to some interesting points and actually brought me to a better panel that I think we're going to have... probably going to actually end up using for the input, and that's going to be this one over here. Now, same situation as the other one. Obviously, we've got the input with the shulker box and whatnot. At the top here, we basically have a buffer indicator. So the plan is going to be that once we do end up using the system, we're not going to be sorting items straight away. We're just going to keep them in a buffer. We'll take care of them as we go along. Now, obviously, I'll press the button, and as the first double chest of buffer gets filled up, you'll see the indicator will light up. The indicators light up as they go along, so as soon as even one's in the buffer, you'll know from there, and then so on from here. The only time that the third light will come on is when the buffer's completely full, so when the last double chest is completely full, then we'll know from that side. Now, if we come and have a little look at the redstone at the back here, we simplified things significantly over the other panel. I mean, there was, one more feature, which was the item spitting out or whatever. But realistically speaking, even with that feature removed, it was still a lot more complicated, and the whole thing's become a lot simpler now that we've removed most of the redstone for it. Down here, I've still got the little item splitter thing that I've kept here. I may or may not choose to maybe still add in the failsafe later on. I'm not 100% sold on it just yet. If I don't, then this whole system's probably not needed either, so it'll be relatively useless. But I do see myself being somewhat careful when it comes to it. And like I said, with the fact that the items are going to be held in here anyway, hopefully I'll pick it up. I don't want to be the one who I just made an entire meme of about 2 minutes ago. So I wanted to kind of expand on the panel over here. So I thought, seeing as we're already dealing with the input and I'm already talking about buffering and starting the system up, I thought it'd be fun to actually, start figuring out what we're going to do in terms of like how we're going to run the system, what kind of select panels we're going to have for starting the system, and so on and so forth. But unfortunately, without actually figuring out the output of the system, it's kind of hard to gauge whether or not certain things are even going to be possible. For example, having the pause feature on already sorting out items may or may not be a thing that we can do until we explore what we're going to actually do with the sorting system. So this is probably where we head away from input and focus our attention on output. So as far as outputs are concerned, we're looking to unload all of our items basically into the storage system at a speed that it can handle. Now, using the slices that we've already assembled before, we're going to be looking at using single hopper speed. Now, even though we're using single hopper speed, this can be kind of manipulated in certain ways, which we'll go through. But let's start off with the most basic option that we have, which is simply just hopper speed. Now, a system like this is something that should suffice for most users. Actually takes care of basically all your items. The only thing it doesn't take care of is unstackables themselves. It doesn't separate them altogether, but that's something that you can process further down the line. However, if you do end up storing all items, then you can go ahead and hook this straight up to your storage system, let the filters pick up all the items that you do store, and then anything left that isn't basically sorted should basically just be the unstackables, which you can have a filter for at the end. This was something I was originally going to go for, actually works pretty well for me, and I could probably still use it, but luckily for us, there's been a advancement in technologies as far as storage tech is concerned, where you can kind of double up on this system here without actually running into the limitations of hopper speed, to a certain extent. And that brings us to these parallel unloaders. We actually have two versions here. There's one on the left here that was mainly developed by Glotz and I believe RAFQ, and there's one on the right here that was mainly developed by Boyan and I think also RAFQ. I'm sure there was actually a bunch more people in storage tech who were involved with the process of this, including like Rapscallion and so on. There was a whole bunch of people who were involved in the overall development of this. But generally speaking, those are the ones who are mainly in charge of building these. Now, these are basically the same system. However, they have some minor differences, or major differences, depending on how you look at it. The system over here is basically meant for a slightly larger server, something like a more shared like technical server. Has a lot of edge case fixes, deals with a larger number of boxes. But something like this to a user like me, and probably a user like you if you're watching this, doesn't really seem all that necessary. Originally when they built this and I was looking at the original version that I tested and ended up breaking, this was significantly bigger and it seemed like a lot. And I remember thinking originally, is there a way to maybe even make this smaller? And I obviously have no real idea of how any of this stuff works. So I mentioned this to Boyan and I think he was super interested in making something for himself anyway. So he had a little poke around and then eventually came up with this system here. This is a much simpler, much more dumbed down version of that and actually deals more with the single player. It uses 6 hopper speed unloading, so you can see here in this system there's six unloaders, and this should suffice for most single player users. Now, how does 6 hopper speed unloading work? Well, it's pretty simple and complicated at the same time. The system never really unloads 6 times hopper speed of one item type. It instead picks out the item out of a box, puts it into a system where it kind of verifies that item. Let's say, for example, these 2 boxes are ones that you put in the system. One of them has glass and then one of them has a stack of pistons. These 2 can unload at the same time because they're not the same item type. So even though we're unloading at hopper speed, they're running on separate filters. So these are pretty much able to unload. Now, let's say, for example, we had another box that looked something like this. This box couldn't run in parallel with any of these ones, so the system would check to see if any of these items match with any of the boxes that were already in the system. If it matches, it holds it in a buffer and doesn't allow it to unload at this time, and probably cycles it around until it is able to unload and isn't unloading of any matching type to this. That's basically how the system works in the dumbest way. Now, I don't want to get too involved in explaining this to you because I believe that Boyan and Glotz will eventually make a system to break it down in a little bit more detail, but generally speaking, that's how it works. And when you consider the size and what it's capable of doing, it actually makes things a lot easier. Now, this system also deals with a bunch more other things too. So it actually separates unstackables for you. It also separates empty shulker boxes too. So this will deal with unstackables, empty shulker boxes, as well as unloading all those items at the same time. So in addition to unloading 6x hopper speed for all these items here, you can also have unstackables being sent to another unloading array, or loading array should I say, where it can then be filtered out separately. So that actually makes things even better. Now with this system, obviously the reason why my input system required us to use boxes is because it only accepts boxes and doesn't accept loose items. The last thing you want to do is have it dealt with any loose items, which is why it's so important to make sure that maybe having that system where you kind of shame the player, as I mentioned earlier, into not putting in any loose items into the system is important, because when you do that, this will break this, and honestly, fixing things like this is pretty catastrophic and probably takes a lot of time and effort. The only issue that I have with this is understanding whether or not there's a way to stop unloading altogether. One of the features that I wanted to add into the storage system as part of the control panel is to think about if you're not actually playing on a server single player and you're playing on like a normal single player on your desktop. How would you be able to pause something if you needed to leave? You don't want to leave your computer running. You don't want to. You need to step away. You set up unloading and then something's popped up and you need to pop out for a second. Is there a way to stop the system whilst it's running, just so you can pause it, save and exit, and then leave and then come back again? Potentially. This is something that I want to explore in a little bit more detail, and probably I'll have to hit Boyan up about. So hopefully, if that is the case, that should make things a little bit easier, because then I know if you wanted to, ultimately you could pause the whole system. The final option that I had in mind originally was box sorting. Now I haven't got an example of a box sorter here, mainly because without too much consideration past the systems I already showed you, I didn't really seem it to be anything that I would actually really take into consideration. And personally speaking, after doing somewhat of a medium amount of research that I did do on it, I would personally say it's probably not worth really most people's times. Box sorting generally works better when you're looking at bulk storage, and I mean like actual bulk, like 15-20 double chests worth of storage. Then you can do box sorting. Is a little bit, makes a bit more sense to me personally. I'm not really that into it, so I wouldn't advise that you do it yourself. But hey, if you want to have a quick look into it, there's plenty of stuff on Storage Tech that really gives you a breakdown of it. This episode's gone on a bit too long for me anyway now, so I think it's time that we start wrapping things up. But before we do that, just wanted to give a quick mention to the original sorter that I showed you at the beginning there. I got a little bit bored and really wanted to kind of squish it all together to make it a little bit more compact. So that's the same system that I showed you earlier on that does the splitting of the items, the boxes, and so on. And now it's just a little bit more compacted to fit in a better space. And what we can do is probably do a little tick warp here just to give ourselves a little bit more time. Let's just split up the boxes, the items. This splits up the items that you put into the input. So that box that I put in there, if I put it on here for you, I had this amount of items here. So the items again came out of this water stream down here. The ones that were in the boxes come out into the same water stream from here, and then the boxes are being shot out over here in a separate water stream. Just thought it was really nice to get it compacted. And to be honest with you, one of the things that I really like about something like a system like this is, yes, it is considerably slower. However, it also comes with the advantages that, if something breaks, it's going to be so much easier to fix. But honestly, this is probably going to be something that I understand over time. The good thing for me is going to be that, realistically speaking, if I am on a server, this probably works a little bit better for me, because I can just leave it to unload for however long it takes, even if it's unloading 3 or 4 double chests over a day or whatever, however long it should take. It's not a big deal to me. In most cases, for simplicity reasons, I would advise something like this too. But when it comes down to releasing all the extra bits for the world download, I'll go ahead and include this in there for you. And honestly, at this point, just taking into consideration after speaking with Boyan, I asked him if he had an option for the pause system over there. He said it was something that he's been asked about. I hasn't had a look at himself. I had a little look into it, and from the little messing around that I did, I noticed quite a few things would break with it if you did try and pause it mid-processing. Something like this was considerably easier to pause without breaking, or at least having too detrimental of a break. But obviously with this system, there's a lot more of a lack of features than with something like that. So everything kind of comes at its stride. But I think at the moment, I'm still going to go ahead and select that one. But I think this is still a solid option to have for input. You've got a good amount of buffer here for all your boxes. It should suffice for most players, if I'm being completely honest. But again, I'm going to wrap things up because this episode's been going on for way too long. In the next episode, though, we're going to be putting everything kind of together, getting a good layout of the system. We'll be looking at the chest storage we're going to be taking into consideration, or some of the chest storages we'll be taking into consideration. I think overall it's going to be really good to finally get to like closer to a final point than we have been so far. Hopefully, again, we'll whack all these pieces together, we'll get them in a nice functional array, hopefully get a good idea of how things work. If the episode doesn't end up being too long, hopefully we can talk about the peripherals too. Otherwise, I'll save that again until the next episode, or the following episode, should I say. Thanks again for watching, like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.